Before revolutions ripped crowns from heads and empires crumbled beneath the tide of enlightenment, there ruled a king who defied the chaos of his age, not with war drums, but with reason, not with conquest, but with compassion. In an era when monarchs measured power by the size of their armies, he measured it by the health of his people, the strength of his institutions, and the quiet dignity of reform. His name? Charles III, and though his reign lasted just under 3 decades, from 1759 to 1788, it reshaped a nation, redefined monarchy, and laid the groundwork for modern governance in one of Europe's oldest realms. Yet today, his story is whispered in the corridors of history, overshadowed by louder, bloodier names. This is not merely the tale of a king. It is the story of how wisdom, when paired with authority, can light a path through darkness without setting the world on fire. Charles III was never meant to inherit the Spanish throne. Born in 1716 as the third son of Philip V of Spain and Elizabeth Farnese, he entered life as Don Carlos of Bourbon, destined not for Madrid, but for a secondary crown in Italy. His early years unfolded in the court of Parma, then later in Naples and Sicily, where he would first taste sovereignty. From 1734, at just 18 years old, he ruled as Charles VII of Naples and Charles I of Sicily, a dual monarchy stitched together by war, diplomacy, and the shifting alliances of 18th century Europe. Yet even in these southern realms, far from the icy politics of northern courts, Charles displayed a rare quality, an insatiable curiosity about how societies functioned, how economies grew, and how ordinary citizens lived. He walked the streets of Naples incognito, listening to merchants, artisans, and farmers. He studied architecture not for vanity, but to understand urban planning. He questioned why plagues spread, why harvests failed, and why justice often favored the noble over the needy. These were not the pursuits of a traditional absolutist monarch. They were the habits of a reformer in waiting. His transformation from regional duke to sovereign of a global empire came not through ambition, but through death. In 1759, his half-brother Ferdinand VI, King of Spain, died childless. With no direct heir, the Spanish crown passed to Charles, who now faced an agonizing choice: abandon his beloved Naples, where he had ruled for 25 years and built a loyal, affectionate following, or accept the weight of Spain, a fractured, debt-ridden empire teetering on the edge of irrelevance. The law was clear. The crowns of Spain and Naples could not be united under one ruler. To become King of Spain, he had to relinquish Naples. And so, in a moment of profound personal sacrifice, Charles bid farewell to the Neapolitan people with tears in his eyes. He left behind his youngest son, Ferdinand, to inherit the southern throne and sailed for Cadiz, older, wiser, and burdened by the knowledge that Spain, once the world's most feared superpower, now struggled to feed its own capital. What awaited him in Madrid was a kingdom in crisis. The treasury was empty, the navy was decaying, the colonies in the Americas were growing restless, and the nobility clung to medieval privileges while the peasantry starved. The Inquisition still cast its shadow over thought and speech. Trade was strangled by bureaucracy. Even basic infrastructure, roads, bridges, sanitation, lay in ruin. Yet Charles did not despair. He arrived not as a conqueror returning to glory, but as a physician diagnosing a patient on the brink. His first act was not a coronation speech, but a silent inventory of dysfunction. He summoned economists, engineers, scientists, and jurists, not aristocrats and generals. He surrounded himself with men like Pedro Rodriguez de Campomanes, the brilliant reformist minister who would become his closest advisor, and the Count of Aranda, a visionary who believed Spain could be dragged, if necessary, into the modern age. Together, they would launch what historians now call the Bourbon Reforms, a sweeping program of administrative, economic, educational, and social renewal that aimed not to destroy tradition, but to rescue Spain from its own stagnation. But reform in 18th century Europe was never simple. Every change threatened someone's power. Every new tax angered those who had paid none before. Every challenge to the Church's authority risked excommunication. Charles knew this. He was devout but not dogmatic. He believed in God but not in superstition. He respected the clergy but not their greed. And so, with surgical precision, he began to cut away the tumors of corruption and inefficiency. He expelled the Jesuits in 1767, not out of hatred for faith, but because he saw them as a state within a state, loyal to Rome over Madrid, controlling education, hoarding wealth, and resisting royal authority. The decision shocked Europe, but in Spain it freed up land, wealth, and mines for a new kind of public service. He centralized power, reducing the influence of regional parliaments and noble councils. He created intendancies, administrative districts run by royal appointees who answered only to the crown, ensuring that orders from Madrid actually reached the villages. He invested in roads, canals, and ports, reconnecting a fragmented nation. He founded schools, academies, and scientific societies. He even outlawed bullfighting in 1771, calling it a barbaric distraction that wasted public time and energy, though popular outcry forced him to relent. Still, the intent was clear. Spain would no longer be ruled by spectacle, but by substance. Yet beneath the surface of progress, tension simmered. The people loved his public works. They saw clean streets, new hospitals, and bustling markets, but feared his intrusion into their private lives. The nobility resented losing tax exemptions. The Church accused him of heresy. And abroad, rivals watched with suspicion. Britain saw Spain's revival as a threat to its colonial dominance. France, though allied through Bourbon ties, grew wary of Madrid's growing independence. The 7 Years' War had just ended in 1763, leaving Spain humiliated, forced to cede Florida to Britain. Charles burned with quiet shame. He would not let that happen again. He rebuilt the navy from the keel up. He modernized the army. He fortified Havana, Cartagena, and Manila. And though he avoided direct conflict when possible, he never forgot the lesson. In a world of wolves, even a shepherd must carry a sword. This was the paradox of Charles III, a man of peace who prepared for war, a traditionalist who championed science, a Catholic king who defied the Pope. He did not seek to overthrow the old order, only to refine it, to make monarchy not a relic but a tool for human advancement. And in those early years of his reign, as Madrid's skyline rose with neoclassical buildings and its libraries filled with Enlightenment texts, Spain dared to hope. Hope that decline was not destiny. Hope that a king could be both father and architect. Hope that after centuries of glory followed by decay, a new chapter could begin, not with conquest, but with conscience. But the world was changing faster than any king could control. Storm clouds gathered over France. Revolutions brewed in distant colonies, and the very ideals Charles embraced, reason, liberty, progress, would soon turn against the thrones that nurtured them. His greatest test was yet to come. Imagine a king who banned torture, outlawed slavery in his homeland, and poured millions into hospitals while Europe's courts drowned in luxury and blood sport. Imagine a monarch who walked among his people without guards, who signed decrees at dawn, and whose greatest pride wasn't a battlefield victory, but a functioning sewer system. This was not a fantasy. This was Charles III of Spain. And in the heart of the 18th century, while other rulers clung to divine right and dynastic vanity, he waged a quiet revolution, one brick, one law, one schoolhouse at a time. But how does a reformer survive in a world built on privilege? How does a king modernize an empire without igniting rebellion? And what happens when the very ideas you champion begin to threaten your throne? This is the story of Charles III, not as a distant figure in a gilded frame, but as a man racing against time, tradition, and the tides of history itself. His domestic agenda was nothing short of revolutionary. While Louis XV of France hosted masked balls at Versailles, Charles III approved the construction of the Royal Botanical Garden in Madrid because he believed understanding plants could cure disease and feed nations. While George III collected paintings, Charles founded the Royal Academy of Fine Arts, not to glorify himself, but to train engineers and architects who could rebuild Spain's crumbling infrastructure. Education became his obsession. He knew that an ignorant populace could never sustain a modern state. So he reformed curricula, introduced science and mathematics into universities, and mandated teacher training. For the first time, Spanish students studied Newton, not just Aquinas. He even established schools for the deaf, among the first in Europe, believing that no mind should be left behind. The church howled that he was undermining faith, but Charles replied calmly, "To serve God is to serve man, and to serve man we must first understand him." Economically, Spain under Charles III experienced a renaissance unseen since the age of the Habsburgs. Silver still flowed from the Americas, but now it was taxed fairly and invested wisely. He abolished internal tariffs between Spanish regions, creating a true national market for the first time. He encouraged olive oil, wine, and wool production, turning rural economies into engines of growth. He founded state-supported manufactories for textiles, porcelain, and glass, reducing dependence on foreign imports. And in a move that stunned Europe, he opened colonial trade to multiple Spanish ports, not just Seville, allowing merchants from Barcelona, Valencia, and Cadiz to compete fairly. The result? A surge in commerce, a boom in urban populations, and a middle class that began to dream beyond survival. For the first time in generations, a shopkeeper in Seville could imagine his son becoming a lawyer. A farmer in Andalusia could save enough to buy land. This was not capitalism as we know it, but it was the seed. Yet his most radical reforms targeted the entrenched powers, the nobility, and the church. The Spanish aristocracy had for centuries lived tax-free, owning vast estates while contributing nothing to the state. Charles changed that. Through the Catastro of Ensenada, a massive land registry and tax assessment, he attempted to impose a universal property tax. Though full implementation failed due to noble resistance, he succeeded in taxing church lands and royal domains more effectively. The church, which owned nearly a third of Spain's arable land, could no longer hide wealth behind sacred walls. Monasteries were audited, church revenues were scrutinized. And when the Pope protested, Charles simply reminded him that in Spain, the king, not the Vatican, was the ultimate authority in temporal matters. This was not anti-clericalism, it was state-building. He did not seek to destroy religion, but to subordinate institutional power to the public good. His social policies were equally bold. He banned the public display of corpses and torture devices, calling them an affront to human dignity. He reformed the penal system, introducing workhouses instead of dungeons for minor offenders. He created the Royal Economic Societies of Friends of the Country, local clubs where farmers, merchants, and scientists could share innovations in agriculture and industry. These societies became incubators of progress, spreading new techniques for irrigation, crop rotation, and animal husbandry. He even tackled urban planning with unprecedented seriousness. Madrid, once a chaotic maze of dirt alleys and open sewers, was transformed. Paved streets, street lights, public fountains, and organized waste collection turned the capital into a model of hygiene. When a devastating famine struck in the 1760s, he didn't hoard grain in royal silos. He opened them to the people and imported wheat at state expense, risking bankruptcy to prevent mass starvation. But his vision extended far beyond the Iberian Peninsula. In the Americas, Charles III implemented the most significant colonial reforms in Spanish history. Alarmed by British encroachment and Creole discontent, he restructured the entire administration of New Spain, Peru, and the Caribbean. He replaced corrupt viceroys with professional bureaucrats. He created new viceroyalties, like Rio de la Plata, modern Argentina, to improve governance and defense. He strengthened coastal fortifications, rebuilt port cities, and funded naval patrols to combat piracy and smuggling. Most controversially, he increased taxes on American colonies and limited their trade with non-Spanish entities, an attempt to funnel wealth back to Madrid. While these measures boosted imperial revenue, they also sowed the seeds of resentment. Creole elites, long accustomed to autonomy, now felt like subjects rather than partners. The very reforms meant to preserve the empire would, in time, help fracture it. Still, Charles's foreign policy was marked by pragmatism, not aggression. He allied with France through the Bourbon family compact, but refused to be its pawn. When the American colonies rebelled against Britain in 1776, Spain saw an opportunity. Though Charles did not officially recognize the United States, fearing revolution might spread to his own domains, he secretly funded the rebels through intermediaries and joined France in declaring war on Britain in 1779. Spanish forces, led by Bernardo de Galvez, captured key British outposts in Florida and the Mississippi Valley, playing a crucial but often overlooked role in American independence. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris returned Florida to Spain and secured navigation rights on the Mississippi, diplomatic victories that restored some of Spain's lost prestige. Yet Charles knew these were temporary gains. The real battle was not for territory, but for relevance in an age hurtling toward democracy. As the 1780s dawned, the king grew older. His energy waned, but his resolve did not. He continued to sign decrees, review budgets, and receive reports well into his 70s. He lived simply, eschewing lavish ceremonies, eating plain meals, and sleeping in a modest bed. His only indulgence was his family. He adored his children, especially his son Charles, the Prince of Asturias, though their relationship was strained by the prince's erratic behavior and opposition to reform. The court whispered that the heir was unfit to rule. Charles III said nothing. But in private, he feared for Spain's future. Would his life's work crumble the moment he closed his eyes? Would the nobles reclaim their privileges? Would the church roll back the clock? He had built a machine of progress, but machines require operators, and he saw no one ready to take the wheel. Then, in 1788, the unthinkable happened. A fever gripped the king. Doctors bled him, purged him, prayed over him. But the old monarch, who had defied plagues, rebellions, and bankruptcies, could not defy time. On December 14, 1788, Charles III died at the age of 72. His last words, according to witnesses, were, "I have tried to do my duty." Madrid wept. Naples, now ruled by his son Ferdinand, declared mourning. Even enemies in London and Vienna acknowledged his greatness. He was buried not in royal splendor, but in the modest crypt of El Escorial, alongside his ancestors, his tomb unadorned, his legacy written not in marble, but in the lives he improved. But death was not the end of his story. For in the decades that followed, as Europe exploded in revolution and Spain collapsed into chaos, people looked back at his reign and asked, what if we had listened? What if reform had gone further? What if Charles III's heirs had followed his path? The answers would shape not just Spain, but the fate of empires. They called him the best mayor of Madrid, not because he held the office, but because he ruled like one. While emperors dreamed of conquest and queens paraded in diamonds, Charles III measured success in clean water, paved roads, and literate children. His reign was not marked by battle cries, but by blueprints, not by executions, but by hospitals rising where slums once festered. Yet, for all his achievements, history remembers him faintly, overshadowed by Napoleon's thunder, George Washington's idealism, or Catherine the Great's ambition. But what if true greatness lies not in changing the world overnight, but in laying stones so quietly that future generations walk upon them without knowing who placed them there? This is the legacy of Charles III, a king who chose service over spectacle, and whose absence would be felt more deeply than his presence ever was. To understand his impact, one must look beyond laws and treaties, into the fabric of daily life. Before Charles, Madrid had no proper sanitation, garbage piled in streets, contaminated water bred cholera. He commissioned the construction of the sewer of Emmanuel, a massive underground conduit that carried waste away from the city center, saving thousands of lives. He mandated that all new buildings include proper drainage and ventilation. He created public parks like the Parque del Buen Retiro, not as royal playgrounds, but as spaces for citizens to breathe, gather, and reflect. He even introduced street numbering, so mail could be delivered, emergencies responded to, and communities organized. These seem mundane today, but in the 18th century, they were acts of radical humanism. He treated cities not as stages for royal display, but as living organisms that required care. His commitment to public health was equally pioneering. He established the Royal Hospital of San Carlos in Madrid, a state-of-the-art facility with separate wards, trained nurses, and strict hygiene protocols. He funded smallpox inoculation campaigns decades before vaccination became widespread. When epidemics struck, he didn't blame divine wrath. He dispatched physicians and quarantine inspectors. He believed disease was not a punishment, but a problem to be solved. And in solving it, he saved more lives than any general ever did with a sword. Culturally, Charles III ignited a Spanish Enlightenment. He did not suppress faith. He elevated reason alongside it. The Royal Spanish Academy flourished under his patronage, standardizing the language and preserving literature. He commissioned the first comprehensive map of Spain, enabling better governance and education. He supported artists like Francisco Goya, not for flattery, but for truth. Goya's early works, full of light and color, reflect the optimism of Charles's reign. Later, under Charles's successors, Goya's palette would darken with despair. The contrast speaks volumes. Charles believed art should uplift, science should serve, and knowledge should be shared, not hoarded by elites. He opened royal collections to the public. He encouraged printing presses. He even translated foreign scientific works into Spanish so farmers and craftsmen could benefit. But his greatest cultural contribution was architectural. Madrid's iconic skyline, the Prado Museum, originally a natural history cabinet, the Puerta de Alcalá, the Royal Botanical Garden, all bear his imprint. He hired architects like Francesco Sabatini and Juan de Villanueva, not to glorify himself, but to create functional beauty. The Prado was never meant to be a museum of masterpieces. It was designed as a temple of learning, where citizens could study minerals, plants, and anatomy. Only later, under his grandson Ferdinand VII, was it repurposed to display art. Yet even that transformation fulfills Charles's original vision, that culture belongs to the people. His influence extended to the colonies with equal force. In Mexico City, Lima, and Bogotá, Spanish officials implemented his urban planning principles. Plazas were widened, hospitals built, universities reformed. He mandated that all colonial towns have a central square, a church, a town hall, and a school, creating a template for civic life that endures across Latin America today. His policies encouraged Creole participation in local government, giving native-born elites a stake in the system. Ironically, this very empowerment would later fuel independence movements, but in the short term, it stabilized imperial rule and improved living standards. Under Charles III, the Spanish Empire reached its administrative peak, not through force, but through integration. Yet for all his foresight, he could not anticipate the storm gathering in France. In 1789, just months after his death, the Bastille fell. The ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity, ideas Charles had cautiously welcomed in moderated form, now turned violent. Monarchs were dragged from palaces, churches were desecrated, the old order was burning. Spain watched in horror. Charles's successor, Charles IV, was weak, indecisive, and surrounded by corrupt advisors like Manuel Godoy. The reforms stalled, the nobility reclaimed privileges, the church regained influence. The momentum of progress ground to a halt. Within 2 decades, Spain would lose most of its American empire, not because of foreign invasion, but because the spirit of reform had died with the king who embodied it. Historians now recognize Charles III as Spain's last great monarch, the final ruler who combined absolute power with enlightened purpose. After him, the crown became a prize for schemers and reactionaries, yet his legacy did not vanish. The institutions he built, schools, hospitals, academies, survived wars and dictatorships. The legal frameworks he introduced influenced Latin American constitutions. Even today, when a Spaniard drinks clean tap water or a Mexican student attends a public university, they walk in the shadow of a king who believed government's highest duty was to serve. But perhaps his most enduring lesson is this: real leadership is not about charisma or conquest. It is about showing up every day, making hard choices, and putting people before power. Charles III never gave a famous speech. He never led an army into battle. He never wrote a philosophy. Yet by the time he died, Spain was healthier, wealthier, and more connected than it had been in a century. He proved that monarchy could be a force for good if the monarch chose to be a servant first and a king second. He ruled for 29 years, yet never sought fame. He changed a nation, yet left no statue of himself. He faced down empires, yet preferred walking alone in his garden at dusk. Charles III of Spain was not the kind of king history celebrates with fanfare, but he was the kind the world desperately needs. In an age of noise, he chose substance. In an era of division, he chose unity. And in a time when power meant privilege, he redefined it as responsibility. His story is not one of dramatic betrayals or battlefield glory. It is the quiet epic of what happens when wisdom meets authority and chooses to heal rather than dominate. And as our own world grapples with inequality, corruption, and disillusionment with leadership, his life offers a mirror and a map. Consider what Spain looked like when he took the throne: bankrupt, fragmented, ridiculed. By the time he died, it was a respected player on the world stage, its cities modernizing, its economy growing, its people healthier and more educated. No other European monarch of the 18th century achieved so much with so little bloodshed. Frederick the Great won wars but left Prussia exhausted. Catherine the Great expanded Russia but entrenched serfdom. Louis XVI flirted with reform but lacked the courage to follow through. Charles III did not merely dabble in progress, he institutionalized it. He built systems that outlived him. And though those systems faltered under weaker hands, their foundations remained. Today, historians call his reign the Golden Age of Spanish reform, a brief, luminous interlude between the glory of empire and the chaos of collapse. But why does this matter now? Because the challenges he faced echo our own. How do we balance tradition and change? How do we ensure that progress benefits everyone, not just the elite? How do we govern with empathy in a complex world? Charles III offers no easy answers, but he shows us a way. Through relentless attention to detail, unwavering commitment to public good, and the humility to listen, even when you wear a crown. He proves that leadership is not about being loved, but about doing what is right, especially when it is unpopular. And yet his story remains largely untold. In school books, he is a footnote. In documentaries, he is overshadowed. But those who look closely see a figure of profound relevance, a ruler who understood that true power lies not in controlling people, but in enabling them. That a nation's strength is measured not by its armies, but by its hospitals, schools, and streets. That dignity is not granted by birth, but earned by service. So as we close this journey through the life of Charles III, we invite you to carry his lesson forward. In your community, your work, your choices, ask not how you can gain, but how you can give. How you can build, not just for today, but for generations you will never meet. Because that is the legacy worth leaving. That is the kind of greatness that endures. And if stories like this, of forgotten leaders, hidden turning points, and quiet revolutions resonate with you, then you've found the right place. This channel is dedicated to uncovering the untold histories that shaped our world, not through hype or conspiracy, but through deep research, thoughtful narration, and a passion for truth. We don't just replay what everyone already knows. We dig deeper, ask harder questions, and bring the past to life in ways that matter today. If you believe history should inspire, not just inform, if you're tired of shallow content and crave substance, then hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of curious minds. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Because the next forgotten hero, the next pivotal moment, the next lesson from the past that could change your present, it's already in the works. And we'd be honored to share it with you. Thank you for watching. Stay curious. Stay thoughtful. And remember, the greatest legacies are often the quietest ones.